So far we have created the containing element for our player. We've added a background and then we have added a hover. So when we hover over our container, we can change the opacity and we can change the height. And the idea here is we're going to take up less room in our layout. And then once the user, if the user is interested and hovers over the element, then the content area will become larger. And that way we're not using up our interface real estate all the time, only if the user is interested in a particular area. All right, so now what we're going to deal with is our font awesome icon for our arrow. So let's go ahead and get our rule for our arrow, and we will just follow our audio 1 hover style. Okay, so now we have our class arrow down, and you'll notice on the div holding our icon we have arrow down. We're going to position this element absolute, so we can stick this one in the upper right corner of our container. And basically I'm also going to add some opacity to this. I'm going to add z-index of 100 because I want to make sure that this icon stays on top of everything. And then we're going to use a transform and a transition. So the transform is going to set the rotate currently to 0 degrees. And then when we hover, we'll change the rotation. Okay, so let's go ahead and see what we have here. So we'll save. Let's just make sure our icon is going to show up correctly. So let's take a look, and there's our icon. So when we hover, we're going to change our icon so it points up. Okay. All right, so let's go back and we will scroll down a little bit so we have a little more room. And now let's go ahead and add our rule, which will deal with our hover for the audio 1 element and also our arrow. Okay, so now let's take a look at what we have here. So we're going to target audio 1 on the hover, and we're also going to target the div arrow down. So we're targeting this, and we're targeting specifically this div with arrow down. Okay, so that's why I have div.arrow down here, because this class is inside the div and I want to be very specific. So we have div.arrow down. We're going to change the opacity to 1. We'll change the transform rotate to negative 180. Okay, so you notice this is not a list. What I'm doing is I'm targeting the class, our audio 1, on the hover. And then on the hover for audio 1, we are then going to target div.arrow down. We're going to change the opacity, and we're going to change the transform, the rotate. So let's go ahead and save. We'll do a quick update. And let's take a look. And you'll see that we have our arrow now doing a rotation. All right, let's go back to our code. Now let's go ahead and target our image. Okay, so if we look back over at our HTML, we have, following our icon, within our content area, we first have an image. Okay, so let's go ahead and create the style for that image. So we're going to target inside audio 1, the class, with a class. We're going to target specifically this image file. We're going to set the width, height, we'll add some margin, We're going to add some border radius, so we'll have a circle going around our image, and we'll add some border, and then I'm going to float this element because I want to make sure that my element stays on the left-hand side, but I want my other elements, which I'll be adding, to go to the right of this image. So that's why I'm using a float here, okay? And again, I'm going to use an absolute on the border because even if I change the root element, I don't want the border width to change. All right, so let's go ahead and save. We'll take a look. And we should have our image showing up, okay? Now, let's go ahead and begin to add some further style to our element here. And what we'll do now is we will target the H3, the H4, and the P tag. So let's go ahead and just grab our rules. So we're going to target the H3, the H4, and the P tag next. Go ahead and fix our formatting. So we'll have our rules for our H3, our H4, and our P tag. So let's go ahead and save. Take a look at what we have here. All right, there we go. So now we have our credit for our composer, and we also have just a brief description of our audio file. All right, now what we need to do is we're going to add two more rules, and what we're going to do is target the container and specifically the actual audio controller. And we're going to change the opacity of our audio controller and then have it become darker or 100% opaque when we hover over it. So let's go ahead and copy our rules. And let's just before we add our rules, let's take a look at what we have currently, okay? So what I want is I want my audio to also be somewhat transparent. And then when we hover over the player itself, then the player will become 100% opaque. So let's go and add our rules. Let me get rid of this extra space. Okay. So we are going to target the container again, and then specifically the audio element inside, which is right here. Okay. We're going to set the opacity to 7.5. And then we're going to have a transition. And then when we hover over the audio element inside of our container, we'll change the opacity to 1 or 100%. So let's go ahead and save. And we'll update. And when we hover, and then we go to our audio file, our controller, we can change the opacity on our controller also. All right, so I'm noticing that my controller, or I should say my graphic container here, I want this to be a little wider. I don't want the controller to be cut off. So let's go back and let's find our audio 1 element, and let's just change the width. So let's try, let's go and make this 24 rem. And then we'll save. Let's update our page and we'll take a look. All right, still not quite wide enough. Let's go back and we'll go 26. That should hopefully be a little closer. Not quite there. Let's we'll go 27. All right, that's working a little better. Matter of fact, I could probably add a little bit more, but you get the general idea. Okay, so creating a graphic container to hold your your HTML5 audio elements.